people here speak of Oswald, they immediately think about JFK and this assassination issue. With me, they are absolutely divorced. I never view Oswald in my earliest memories, and in my wrote book. This obsession was not with me. That's very important psychologically. I could view Oswald as a normal man, not potential presidential killer. For a modern, listener, reader who knows history now, they can't divorce the two, which is rather unfortunate. I can. And my book exactly does this. The subtext demonstrates that Oswald was still, a person, a normal person. Well, that's one very important point. So I never viewed him through the prism of this assassination issue. That's very important. And I saw him as an absolutely normal person. We are the same age. We had the same interest. We both like music, good music, classical music, literature. We discussed politics, philosophy. And I was surprised how he was keen on discussing these issues, politics and philosophy. To me, both were boring. We lived in a surrounding of Soviet reality where indoctrination was a routine of our time, and it was absolutely boring. And he was a fresh listener, and which is important when you read attention in your interest and your speaking partner, you're sort of lighted, and it makes point for discussion, useful discussion. So who discussed that? And we we saw girls, we out to the country. Well, normal activity of two young men, although divided by background. And this is also very interesting. He was representative of capitalism, capitalist system, and I was at that time a believer in the best of the Soviet system. And we sometimes clashed our views. And he was very outspoken about that. He would say, "You live here like slaves." And that was a sort of revolution to me. Said you can't travel. To me, coming from him, it was a tete-a-tete discussion, debate. It was rather revealing. I started thinking, why? And that is also very interesting, communicating with Lee.
Well, much of your book, again, this is a new book coming out, new edition coming out in May, first week of May of this year. Much of it is your experiences, including where you tape record sessions to practice English and joke around, and you still have some of these tape recordings. That's much of your book, but you know, the human mind thrives on conflict to some extent, probably. And so another part of your book is there would be various visiting writers, like the famous Norman Mailer, who would come and try to meet you and interview you. And that's part of your book. And can you tell us a little bit, and I think this is the first interview on this, broadcast interview, what it was like to meet the famous author, Norman Mailer, who comes, you're smiling, and seeks out an obscure medical scientist to explore what was the real Oswald like, so that he could prepare a 700-page book that he published on the real Oswald, in which he says, you know, that doctor, I don't think he was helping me. So here's our conflict. Now, why is it that you would not help the great and wonderful Norman Mailer?
Well, that's an
Andrew,
opinion that a lot of people are interested in hearing, I'm sure. Great and
and
wonderful.
Andrew, I was full of respect. Well, Norman Mailer. When I learned about his coming over, I was awed. It was trepidation, such a great. I looked up his books. We had some in library here. His book on Vietnam was really very interesting, and I liked his style and everything. So I expected to see an impartial researcher who came here to find the truth. And I was ready to help him in any way. Uh, it looks like I'm the only one who tries to rehabilitate Lee Harvey Oswald throughout all those conspiracy theories and what's not. When we met, I think his first he was set on studying background. I understand him. Around him, there were interpreters, people who prepared newspapers for him, and that sort of things. Possibly he made a list of possible potential interviewees and everything. And I got an idea that I was left for the afters after he collected all the information, so that his interview with me would be more informative. Possibly he would collect information about me from others who knew me. And in the meanwhile, uh, I got a small book from Lifton, and I thank him for that. Vultures is something where Lawrence Schiller, crony, well, a friend of Norman Mailer, conducts his investigation where he pours dirt on all those independent researchers who try to see truth about assassination and disagree with the official point of view. And it was an eye-opener. I immediately understood what sort of people came over, and that was a disappointment. Norman Mailer sort of, I respect him all the same as an author, as a hardworking author, but when you see through the mind of those people, and Schiller would just approach me and would say, you know, Norman Mailer needs penetration to his character's mind. And to this end, he needs all those dirty things that we are usually somehow hide from others. He's a psychologist. Well, I thought it's a very good try in view of information I got and in view of the attitude to Oswald. So they came over to collect information that would, in the thinking, confirm that Oswald was a presidential killer. And from that, well, a sort of game started. I wouldn't give Norman Mailer interview. Certainly it was disappointed. Just a friend of Lee Harvey Oswald wouldn't cooperate. And they didn't know that I got this information. And we discussed many things about literature, about this and that. And later, Norman Mailer would complain, Eric, no, that's my Russian name, Ernest. They believe Eric is friendly from Ernst, not Ernie. Would discuss anything, but not Oswald. That was true. That was, I believe, Norman, well, he somehow, well, he fell from the pedestal for me. And that was the situation with Norman Mailer.
And so to put it in, to rephrase it perhaps, but seek your confirmation, Norman Mailer you approached with an open mind and great respect, but in your dealings with him and his friend and researcher, Lawrence Schiller, you felt that they were only looking for tidbits that would confirm a thesis that Oswald was a deranged killer. And so
Exactly.
you pulled back. Here's a question. Did the researcher Lawrence Schiller, who was trying to set things up for the big interviews with Norman Mailer, did Lawrence Schiller tell you that he had written a very strong book before his trip, Schiller himself, uh, confirming the Warren Commission official view that Oswald was the killer?
No, Sheila gave no information on that. Actually, they gave me no information about the intention of everything. Certainly, they came here to collect, well, say, circumstantial information that would certainly, in the end, frame up Oswald as a presidential killer. Nobody saw the smoking gun, but his way, with his grip pen, he could frame everybody given proper information, dirty information, as they were after in this in the so-called investigation.
So
Yes,
they come
and
back. So they come back to the U.S. and with all the power of a prestigious publisher and renown, their view is, well, there's this professor who knew Oswald, but he's holding back. And their implication, am I correct, is that you're holding back all the bad stuff, but in fact, you were holding back just involvement because you thought that anything you said would be used to distort the record. Is that correct?
exactly. It would be cited out of context in the first place. Oh, yeah. One detail, later, already after Norman Mailer left, Schiller appeared again in my laboratory and said, how about giving an interview now? I said, no way, and will you please sign this book? And I produced that book, that notorious book. He was absolutely shocked. He said, oh, it explains it. And he signed it. And then he, well, like in Somnambula, he tried to find the door. He fumbled, find the knob, and went out without saying anything else. It was a shock to him. Well, when he knew he lost, and he knew why he lost.
Well, and you met Norman Mailer, is it 7 times?
Well, I didn't count. And I say it was very interesting. He was an interesting person. It was very fascinating to discuss things and about style of writing, about, well, this and that. Occasionally, they would try to feel how I think about this and that. He tried a point of homosexualism, a point of Jews, a point of, at one point, Norma referred to Oswald as a cur that just thought too much on himself in a passing, you know. He would just drop a hint to probe into my reaction. Well, I had to with straight face tolerate all that and just try to get the best of him as a literary professional, because at the time I was on my book. And again, Schiller would say, oh, Ernst, now that you're a writer, I said, not in the presence of normal Mailer. Well, still the situation.
Gentlemen,
we're coming up on a break.
Yeah, let me do a break, Andrew. And when we come back, we'll pick up on Norman Mailer. This is very interesting. This is the Phil Mikan Show. We're talking with Ernst Titovets.
No, you're joking.
A good try, a good try.
We'll be right back.
Mhm.
This is the Phil Mikan Show. We're back. We are talking, Andrew Craig is hosting this show, really, and he's talking with a gentleman who has written a book. Andrew, pick it up.
Well, we're talking about the author of this brand new updated memoir of Dr. Ernst Titovets. And one thing I'd like to just talk directly to the audience. In our last segment, we were talking about how history is written by distinguished authors who are presented to a worldwide audience, like Norman Mailer, based on previous achievements and then addressing important topics like the JFK assassination and his alleged assassin, sole assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. But you in this radio audience are also participants in history, because what we've been talking about, and I think Phil would like to continue on this, is we're critiquing the historians like Norman Mailer, whose book on this was very heavily promoted, and now we're talking with one of his attempted sources. So you in the audience here have a chance to evaluate how is the history that we think we know shaped. And I'll leave it to that. Phil, I'm sure you've got a lot of great questions here.
Well, the thing that impresses me most is that Ernst knew Oswald in what would be called his formative years, and also at no point did he ever say that he thought Oswald was capable of committing a murder. And Oswald basically left his presence 2 years before the assassination. I think he said he left in 62, 61.
62.
Can I interrupt
62.
for half a second before you get to your question?
Yep.
Just many young people in your audience, these are just names. Oswald was raised primarily in New Orleans, troubled home. He joined a kind of youth group. It was an air course, a civil air patrol. It was very prestigious way for young people. It was kind of not just a glorified Boy Scouts, but it was an entryway to military service. And then he joined the U.S. Marines, and it's very little known that he was able to join the Marines at age 17, work his way up, and work on the secret spy program as a radar technician, the U-2 spy program, which was so secret even Americans didn't know about it. And then he goes to the Soviet Union. So I'm interrupting, but just that background. He was a Marine who somehow learned Russian while in the Marines, and then ends up in the Soviet Union after working on this super secret spy program.
Ernst, let's. I have a question for you. We know that you met Oswald as a young man when you were both young men. At the time of the assassination of Kennedy, it was worldwide news. What was your reaction when you heard that Oswald was, number one, the primary suspect, and then named the assassin? What was your reaction? What did you think about all that?
Well, I would divide JFK assassination and Oswald in the sense that first I heard about JFK assassination when I was in Moscow. At that time, I was in my first postgraduate year working on my Ph.D. And I went to Moscow to the biochemistry department in Moscow University to swap some ideas and to get chemicals. And there was a way to get that. And late at my hotel room, I heard about the news. It didn't register with me at all. I knew nothing about JFK, apart that he was a president of the United States, and absolutely no emotions. I just thought about those things that happen in that bad capitalist world. What would you expect from there? Well, Soviet propaganda carried well, all that sordid news that they would be killed in the street, just going innocently about your business, that sort of things the capitals is. So that was JFK. I'm sorry to add that at that time it was my perception of this tragic event. But when I later, in a day, heard about that Oswald was killed, well, I was shocked. You know, in that American world, absolutely unknown world for me at the time, Oswald was the only living person, real person. The rest was just shadows, in my understanding of the time. And those shadows were dangerous. The result was that he was killed. That registered with me as a tragedy. And when I heard that, I knew that he was, alleged presidential killer, I didn't believe that. And nobody around me who knew Oswald, nobody believed in that done an effect, that he was presidential killer. It wasn't in him at all.
Did you ever meet his wife?
Yes, I did before he was married, and after that, Marina also. Yes,
and she's always come through in terms of our perception, I think, as individuals in the country, as very shy, very reclusive, and very insular. I mean, she went through a lot of stress through that whole process, and the country allowed her to kind of disappear. But she seemed to be very much a victim in that whole thing with Oswald, and there was a great deal of sympathy for her. But you're a firm believer that Oswald was not the perpetrator of.
No way. As for Marina, well, you need to read my book first to get a full picture of her. First, in her home surroundings, I mean, back in Russia, I gave quite some prominence to her, and the relationship, it could be put just in 2 words. It's too complicated. In any way, he wasn't very involved in Oswald's idea of better society. She didn't share his belief. They were just his belief. She believed it was just his fancy and something out of this world. He better put his efforts bringing money to the family. That was her idea. So there was this no give and take on that ground between the two. Well, so much for Marina, and the rest is in the book. I wouldn't just, that's it. That's it for Marina. And again, when he was first interrogated, and she would tell the Warren Commission that he believed Oswald was the culprit, the one who killed Kennedy. She was under stress at that time, under pressure, of course. I have no doubt that she was intimidated in private, say this or else. No doubt about that. A girl, a mother with 2 children, it would be very difficult to intimidate her and tell her what she would advise her, what she would say before the officials. But later, official investigators, but later, many years later, when she felt herself free, she voiced a different opinion that Lee was innocent. That's, I think, what I would say here about Marina Oswald.
And just as, let me insert a little context, historical context for the younger listeners. Uh, Originally, here she is. She's got two young daughters.
Babies, two babies.
And the popular view is that her husband is a Marxist communist who killed the president of the United States, and here she is, a Russian. And so she initially, for the first years, went on public record as helping support his guilt. But according to in-depth researchers later, including one great reporter and author, Dick Russell, years later, they convened legal experts and other authors and have published that she wanted to contradict her first thoughts, and her daughters wanted to describe how their father was not guilty. And the experts who were sympathetic said, it's very, very difficult because of what you said initially. And at that point, she's more or less retreated from public life because people said, look, no matter what you say, it's going to be very difficult for you given what you said in 1964. Is that basically your understanding?
This is a question for me.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So she was, as far as central cause of Lee was concerned, she was of peripheral importance. He was a very tender father. He adored his children. That was in him. But as far as this give and take with his wife, well, usually we rather expect that they would share, well, wife and husband and wife would share something common, well, as far as the ideas are concerned. That's not the case with this couple. Well, I would, if I may, once we touched upon Norman Mailer and Lee.
Andrew, we have about 6 minutes.
6 minutes? Well, we haven't covered practically nothing. Well,
no, we could do a 10-part series. No.
Ah, like that.
Yes.
Okay, that's the beginning only. What I'd like to give you about Oswald's theories and activity and everything, Norman Mailer would say, definitively later, he wrote this is, Oswald was 5 years ahead of his time, where it is to say that by 1968, he wouldn't have felt prodigiously alone. Hippies were moving up into Northern California and Oregon to found small societies on principle much like his, democracy. Indeed, what Oswald offers seems a mere libertine pronouncement than a radical call to arms. It is very important. Even Norman Mailer writes here, libertine pronouncement, his theory, also theory, Athenian system, and his general trend of, thought, then a radical call to arms. So coming from Norman Mailer, it is important. And again, Macmillan wrote about Oswald. Oswald was a pioneer with his ideas, if you will, or a lonely American anti-hero, a few years ahead of his time. So, well, that was what Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, you're talking about Priscilla Macmillan.
Exactly, Marina and Lee.
an author, and
Maureen and Lee.
she's often been connected with the official view of the assassination and is held up as an expert, but you uh, disagree with her perceptions, correct?
Well, as far as she writes here, she's absolutely right. She writes the political solution. Well, he reached from his own experience, from reading, from talking to his friends in Minsk, was familiar to the solution proposed by a generation of American activists in the later 1960s, a participatory democracy at community level. It's very important. So, and then he goes on, also was the pioneer, if you will, or a lone American anti-hero a few years ahead of his time. Well, I agree with that part of her, what she writes.
Well, we just have a few moments, but uh, or actually a couple minutes, but maybe one of my last questions is to revisit uh, for people who want to know more about this. The book Oswald Russian Episode is out now. This you privately published beginning in I think 2010. Previous versions of this, but they were very limited circulation. Virtually nobody knew about them. Um, why is it that you're bringing this out now? What's the importance to anyone to care about what Oswald was like between 1959 and 1962?
As you feel, Oswald, this whole issue has become personal to me. I rather view, well, against what was done to him. He really wanted to bring a better life, in theory, to American people. He well did a lot to educate himself. He just I just will edit it, but it's important. He was not only self-proclaimed philosopher, he wrote his essays about the life of, it's very important. He completed a 50-page essay, The Collective Life of a Russian Worker, wrote speech notes on the right, far right, on communism and capitalism, the Communist Party of the United States, the Athenian system. He appeared as a lecturer at Spring Hill College audience, giving his information lecture about contemporary Russia and practice of communism. He appeared on radio debate in New Orleans. So he really was active in his activity and tried to put his idea to broadcast his ideas. And that's important part of his activity. And all that together means that he meant what he thought about the bright future for American people. He was very patriotic in many respects. My book gives many examples about that, starting with attitude to American food, American girls, American army. Everything was better. American was better. It was naive, and we would discuss that, debate that, but that's his attitude. And again, non-violence. He was governed by Stoic philosophy, and his wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance were his four guiding principles in his life. Thank you, Andrew.
Well, we have maybe a minute or two, and I'll
Yeah,
hand it over.
we have about a minute and a half. Go
And
ahead.
I'll hand it over to our host, our real host. But just to sum up from my perception, much of your book is about things that you did, which because you're in your 20s, it's going to concerts, it's going to parties, meeting girls, talking like there's an expression I'm sure you know with your good English, sophomoric conversations that college students might have in their sophomore year about the world. And this is much of what you're writing about, but the importance is a dimension that people don't know about this historical figure. So I'm so proud to be part of this, your first interview on this broadcast interview on this updated memoir. And I'll turn it over to Phil. What's your thoughts?
Well, I got to tell you, the thing that I'm excited about with this book is that it's the first, probably the first and only book that has ever come out on Oswald that not only is positive, that's one thing, that's an honest portrayal by the author, but that gives examples of who and what he was on an intimate, very kind of private basis. I mean, this is everyday life. We weren't looking at him on any kind of a stage. He was just going to work, going to parties, going out to lunch, doing whatever, and talking schmooze talk with a buddy about philosophy. That's a very important ingredient that Ernst Titovets has brought to us. It's just something that you have not seen. You haven't seen that about Kennedy. You haven't seen that about a lot of people. And the implication to me that this young man was accused of one of the crimes of the century, of the 20th century, and it stuck, I think is something that's got to be brought to the public's attention and say, here's another view. And this book does that.
Thank you. That's true. That's true. And I'm absolutely honest about what I give in that book. I don't want to impress.
We can tell
people.
that by talking to you. That your honesty is on display. There's no question about that.
And let readers judge what is true or not according to their experience and everything. But this is a very interesting character. I always thought, what would be had he lived? Well, the fact that he was removed from the scene, understandable point of view of perpetrators of the crime, I mean, JFK assassination, because Lee would shatter to smithereens all accusation against him. He was a very good speaker, thinker, and he was that sort of people, a dangerous person in an open court hearing. That's why he was removed. And had he been there, there would be a situation when people would start thinking, if not Oswald, then who?
Right.
Yeah. And again, they tried to cover that Oswald was an insane mind, absolutely stupid. He was first underwent medical evaluation when he was a boy, a truant boy. Well, at that time it was a common thing, and he was found to be of superior mental capabilities. Then I knew him here, nothing absolutely that would think him even as a marginal person, not to say about a psychic case. A professor, psychologist, psychiatrist also evaluated him, no problem. And again, he worked at a top security air base in Atsugi in a control tower it only stands to reason that American medics wouldn't let a psychic into that very sensitive area to play with switches and everything.
Yeah, I think that point.
Don was absolutely sane.
Right. He would have been vetted many different ways to prevent that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Ernst Titovets, you have written a great book. And Andrew Craig, you know, your list of known experts in all areas is just exceeding your fame. So I want to thank you for bringing the gentleman. Show the book one more time and close out for us.
Well, thank you so much. And further information on this can be available, of course, through the Phil Mikan show. But also, we're going to, at the Justice Integrity Project, print a link to this and background information. So thank you for what I regard as a historic interview to both of you, and it will be of great interest, I think, worldwide to the JFK research community that I'm part of, and this broadcast will be part of.
Everybody out there, have a good day.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being with us, Ernst. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Everybody out there, have a good day.
Bye. I'm off.
Okay, well, I think that was great. Phil, you got any tips for us, aside from me going to my beautician so I look as good as you guys?
No. You look very distinguished. No, I think the more you do, he's immersed in the information. There's no doubt about that. But you got to read the book. And in terms of the number of years that he took doing it, I think what's fascinating about Ernst is the fact that he was Oswald's buddy, and he was a friend at a time when this kid was. It would be like you or me going to the dark side of the moon. I mean, a different culture, different this, and he gravitated toward this man, and they were buddies. And he, by the way, he happens to be a doctor, and he also happens to do somebody that deals with mind chemistry and hello. I mean, those are pretty good credentials.
Phil, I'm going to send you this paper he just delivered, and you can entertain yourself with that. But it's the ultimate scientific jargon. Here's one last thing before he departs. By the way, Phil and I talk all the time, and in fact, that's how this came up, even off air. You asked about Marina Oswald, Phil. Rather than talk to you privately about it, let me mention my perception, but he can contradict me since he's on, and this is not part of the show. I think, to boil it down, part of the reason he said you got to read the book is he, I believe, probably had a somewhat mixed perception of her because, like most people, she's evolved. And so she was a young girl in the Soviet system, and that's not necessarily a finished product, and yet that's how he knew her. And so his view is probably not that complimentary in a sense, but he probably doesn't want to get into it all aside from carefully chosen words in the book, but he's not some big opponent of her now. Is that kind of it, or did I miss something here?
Oh, yeah, that's correct. That's correct, Andrew.
Well, Andrew. I think she was really swept away by events that nobody could ever predict what would happen in their lifetimes.
Well, I would advise you to read my book first.
Okay.
That the nuances about her well, that's
We'll get you a copy. You're getting a reviewer's copy. Would you like print or electronic?
Oh, send me an electronic one.
well.
Done within the hour. Okay, he's got